Tonight on America's Dumbest Criminals. Sure, it looks like a parrot, but is it really a stool pigeon? It's the middle of the night, and do you know where your kid is? We do. And can you really call it a chase if the pace is this slow? Stick around because things are bound to pick up for a paddy wagon full of perpetrators here on America's Dumbest Criminals.
Delta 1566, give me a call on your
Now, welcome your host for America's Dumbest Criminals, Daniel Butler and Debbie Allen.
Hi there.
Hey, thank you. Debbie,
Hi.
now, may I ask a personal question?
Uh-oh. I don't know. Anybody else I trust? You make me nervous.
Okay, great. I'll ask you. Here's the question. What size shoe do you wear?
Why in the world do you need to know my shoe size?
No, I was just going to get you a little gift. Or something.
Oh, okay. In that case, 5.5 medium.
In a combat boot? No. But I figured you had tiny little feet because you have that tiny little body, so it all
Are we
fits together.
going somewhere with this line of
As a
questioning?
matter of fact, I am. Our first story concerns a shoe imprint that led a crook to being tripped up. Now, if you'd been the perpetrator, of course, they would have had to get out the microscopes for those
Can we
tiny
just get to the story?
Yeah, here's the evidence that's as plain as the foot on this lady's face.
Okay, I'm Detective Robert Stevens of the Durham Beach Police Department Crimes Against Persons Unit. One of the most bizarre cases I've seen in 20 years here at the police department involved this sneaker. We had a lady that was a victim of a violent crime where the suspect stomped on her head with a sneaker. The word Brooks came up on her head, and we did some research and found out that it was a 1989 high-top basketball sneaker. We were investigating the crime when the suspect came in on an unrelated crime to give another statement, and lo and behold, he had on the sneakers. We took the sneakers off the suspect, sent that off to the lab with the pictures of the injury on the lady's head, and the lab was able to positively match the sneaker to her face. And as a result of his stupidity, he's doing 50 years in prison.
Wow, that must have hurt.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm sure it hurt. Yeah, but she is fine now, and I think she's getting an endorsement deal from the sneaker company.
Stop.
Well, she could have.
All right, now here's a trail that was a little tougher to follow than a set of shoe prints. It starts off as a simple robbery, but ends in a photo finish. See what we mean as we open the scrapbook on something to remember me by.
I was investigating a forgery case where a person had stolen approximately 2 boxes of checks. And in these 2 boxes, I had learned that 2 of them were written by a female. Well, this got me a little excited. And these were different because all the others were written with a male signature. And one of these was written to a department store, which is local in our city. And I went to that department store. Well, we started looking into this check, and on the back of the check has numbers which indicates what the person had purchased. And we found that this person had purchased a whole bunch of film. Me and the security officer went to the film department in order to check this out. And when we started looking, we both looked over at the self-portrait studio of the department.
Ooh, that's nice.
And we both looked at each other and says, no way, we can't believe this. Nobody can be this stupid. We went to the department and asked the girl who worked behind the counter, and she was able to pull up the person's name, their address, and phone number, all within right there. And sure enough, this person had purchased all these photos of themselves and a friend with a forged check. And we looked at each other, and we just couldn't believe that it would be this easy.
Those glamour shots, you gotta watch out. You've heard of acting like a kid in a candy store, but how does a kid act in a convenience store? Especially a kid in a convenience store long after closing time? Well, we've got the answer on this surveillance footage.
You're watching a 14-year-old boy stocking up on all the things that Santa didn't bring him, like cigarettes and lighters. When he trips an alarm, he heads for someplace kinda like the North Pole, The dairy case, hoping to hide there. He removes cartons of milk, but an officer finds him in under 2 minutes. Remember, son, Santa finds out who's naughty or nice.
Hey, here's another dumb law. In Kentucky, a person is considered sober until he or she cannot hold on to the ground.
When you can't hold on to the ground, now that is drunk. Which reminds me of a story about two guys who were 3 sheets to the wind when they decided just to sail on home. But with the help of a police officer in Pennsauken, New Jersey, their plans ran aground.
Several years ago, we did a sobriety checkpoint on the Wednesday night prior to Thanksgiving, which is a notoriously busy drunk driving night, probably the busiest of the year. One of the people that sticks in my mind was a car that was pulled in on suspicion of the operator driving while intoxicated. The driver informed us that they were coming back from a party and that he was not the designated driver for the drunk passenger. He was the devastated driver for the drunk passenger. So, of course, he was arrested, and neither one of them fared that well that evening.
And you never want to get into a car with a devastated driver. Well, you want proof that it's a small world? Get the details on how a thief is clearly beaten by the odds when he tries to use a stolen credit card. It's this week's Blue Light Special. Of all the people shopping at this mall, a crook picked this woman.
The guy pulled up in his car, and I thought he was going to ask me directions because he just kind of pulled up and like hesitated a minute, and then he just reached his hand out and grabbed my pocketbook and took off.
He hurried to this office supply store where he bought an $800 printer, then decided to continue his shopping spree at this electronics store. Meanwhile, the victim notified police. Then she called her husband, who just happens to work at the very store that the purse snatcher and his accomplice had selected.
At the same time that he's talking to his wife on the telephone, an employee at the store is explaining to him that somebody's trying to use a stolen credit card.
When they came in, they were kind of nervous, and then when I started showing them the camcorders, they immediately said, "We'll take this one." And I thought that was too quick.
Smelling a rat, he alerted the husband.
You know, it was just too unbelievable to even, to think that these guys that had just stolen my wife's pocketbook were here in the store using my credit card.
The woman and her husband were amazed at their good fortune, while the crook felt beaten to a pulp by Lady Luck.
Yeah, what are the odds? That lady was robbed 26 miles from her husband's store. Go figure. They say that a dog is man's best friend, but it's apparent that the parrot in our next story makes an excellent partner for the police, except for trying to make those little bitty bulletproof vests. Now, see how Polly and the police work together in getting this crook to talk.
My name is Michael Daugherty. I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma, Police Department. I was assigned to work property crimes here at the Police Department. Had a report that a burglary had occurred at a pet store.
And there you are. There you are. Get that.
No suspects and no evidence. I overheard a suspect at the police department being interviewed about a separate case, and he indicated that a Reggie had a new parrot. Went out and found Reggie, and I brought him in for an interview. In the interview, I continually accused Reggie of the burglary, and he sat and denied it. And running out of everything else I could think of to say, I finally told Reggie, I've got a witness that I gave a polygraph to. He passed it, and he told me that you did this burglary. And he demanded to know who this was, and I said, the parrot told me you did this. Reggie's eyes dropped to the floor, and he thought just a couple of moments. He raised back up and said, that little son of a... After I fed him and took care of him, he ratted me out. He was convicted of that crime. He spent 10 years in prison, and now we call him the Stool Parrot.
Coming up in just a minute, a car chase only speeds up when it becomes a foot race. But first, with news cobbled together with rumor and hearsay, here's Daniel with ADC headlines.
Now, how much influence does media have on behavior? Well, apparently a lot, at least for one 68-year-old woman in Seattle. She was busted for shoplifting 4 packs of cigarettes, motivated by hearing Judge Wapner of the People's Court say, quote, "Everybody steals at least once in their life." Who would have thought Judge Wapner could exert that kind of influence on our culture? I mean, besides the Rain Man. An accused bigamist came up with a novel defense to explain why he agreed to marry a second woman before divorcing his first wife. He claimed his overwhelming sexual desire diminished his mental capacity. Insert your own Clinton joke here. But we wish him well as he shares a cell with guys whose nicknames are definitely not Einstein or Edison, if you get my drift. Now, for a crime that you'd expect only in Atlantis. A woman in Trenton, New Jersey was robbed of $91 in food stamps by a tall man wearing a black rubber suit and flippers who threatened to shoot her. She offered no resistance because the man was carrying a long case that she believed might have contained a spear gun. Well, there you have your Lloyd Bridges Sea Hunt Memorial moment for tonight. And with that, we close the file on ADC headline news, ripped from somewhere near the back of your local newspaper. Debbie?
Thank you, Daniel. You've seen the sign that says slow men working or slow men working. This next story could have used a sign that said slow men escaping. And if you think crooks live life in the fast lane, this footage from Los Angeles might change your mind.
By the time we've picked up the action, if you could call it action, one man has jumped out of the vehicle and made a break for it on foot. It probably made for a faster getaway than what you see here. Slowing things down even more is the fact that police officers have flattened this hit-and-run suspect's car, leaving him to roll on down the highway on his rims. Maybe we should pick up the pace on our end. That's a little more like a chase. But finally, the man decides to try something else. Or maybe he just got bored. He runs across the train tracks and even takes time for a little backyard conversation as he goes along his not-so-merry way. But all bad things have to come to an end, so he is finally brought to a halt at a stop sign. So much for living life in the fast lane.
Hey, you know, there's a reason the police officers wear uniforms, so they won't be naked. No, it's so that everyone in the world will know who they are. It makes perfect sense, well, except to this one dope dealer who apparently didn't get the memo on this universal truth. Here's a perfect example of why we have a feature called I'm Where? You're Who?
All right, I'm Steve Aldrich. I'm a sergeant with the Holly Hill Police Department. We were working a narcotics bust one night, and after we made our original bust, I was driving the car that we'd confiscated back to the police department. I needed a phone number off the telephone booth, so I pulled into one, and this guy approached me. He asked me if he could buy a 20, which was $20 worth of rock cocaine, but not here. There's cops everywhere. I said, really? I said, well, come on, get in. So he goes around the side of the car, starts to get in, sitting on my evidence, so I picked it up, I put it beside me. He sits down, starts to back up, he goes, just go around the block. And I'm still wearing all my police gear. So we started around the block, did a U-turn. I said, how much was that you needed again? He said a 20. So he gives me 2 10s. I said, okay. Start driving back to the police department. He looks at my shirt and says, are you with the sheriff's department? I said, no. Drive a little further, he looks over again, he goes, police department? I said, yes. And we just go back to the police department and put him in the jail.
We love it when the bad guys make it easy for the good guys. Now, some things like that pretty well defy explanation, and this next story is a case in point. But let me warn you, he is not overdressed for this occasion.
After a call for a domestic disturbance, we arrived at a residence. We noticed some windows were broken. One of the deputies went up and spoke to the residents of the home and found out there had been a domestic disturbance that had occurred. The male subject had left and was someplace in the general area. After that, we attempted to locate the suspect, checking the outbuildings and all the ground around there, and saw some feet under a vehicle. The gentleman wasn't really interested in coming out too quickly, which sometimes criminals aren't interested in coming out right away. As I recall, we actually pulled him out and found that the man was naked. He was nude, buck naked. Of course, we handcuffed him as a precautionary measure. He seemed to be pretty well intoxicated, and we were able to secure him enough to place him in my patrol vehicle, and I escorted him to the Saline County Jail in the nude, but we were kind enough when we got him here to put a blanket around him. I've seen some interesting things, but nothing quite as funny as a naked guy under a vehicle that I've had to drag out and take to jail. That's about as funny as it can get in 20 years.
Almost everyone gets a ticket once or twice in a lifetime.
Not me.
Yeah, but you make Florence Nightingale look like Mae Webb.
Come on, I just try to live right.
Yeah, well, maybe you should set up a big sister relationship with this next crook. He stacked up a whopping $405,000 in fines, okay? They don't take MasterCard for that. And you probably won't believe the reason unless you hear it directly from a police officer involved in bringing the man to justice. Check it out.
I'm Captain Jeff Cameron, and we're here at the Redondo Beach Police Department in California. Well, the story that we've got here is one about a suspect who walked into trouble with the police. Actually, we had an officer respond in the early morning hours to a suspicious subject. And as part of his investigation, he ran a warrant check on this suspect. As it turned out, he had $405,000 worth of warrants. Sounds like a lot of money, but what's even more impressive is those warrants were for jaywalking. 4 of the warrants were for crossing the street outside the crosswalk. Standing on the center divider, $90,000. Crossing against a red light, $90,000. Standing on the center divider, another $90,000. Crossing against a red light, another $90,000. Roughly rounded off, it totaled to be about $405,000 in warrants. And the only car that he got into was a police car. So you might say that this suspect walked into trouble with the police, trouble that warranted his arrest.
Poor guy. Somebody needs to teach him the rules of the road, huh?
Hey, $405,000. That'll take your house and your bass boat for that.
Sure would.
Yeah, you better watch your step, especially if you're in Redondo Beach, California.
No kidding.
Well, we're out of time for this edition, but there's more dumb to come next week.
I like that. Dumb to come.
There he is.
If you've got a lead on a story, or you just can't wait till next week for more state-of-the-art stupidity, visit our website at www.dumbcrimes.com.
We want to thank you for joining us and extend our gratitude to the law enforcement officers who make this show possible. Every day they lay their lives on the line to keep us safe from the stupidity of would-be criminals.
As always, we hope that we've all learned from others' mistakes.
But if you still haven't, you just might be on America's Dumbest Criminals next week.
Bye-bye.